What up, though?
Welcome to Woman Crush
Every day,
where we discuss queer media, especially when it is black and especially when it is woman. I'm your host, Tang B, aka Sean B. Scribe.
And I'm your host, Allison, aka Al Woo.
And today we are going to discuss Season 2 of A Pause with Sam J on HBO, Episode 2.
Yes, but before, subscribe! Stop playing with us. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button because each week we talk about queer media. Black queer media. Who else is doing that?
Nobody.
None but us.
Just about the black women.
You feel me? So tap in. It's a beautiful place to be.
Yes. All right, so let's get into this episode. If you've never watched A Pause with Sam J.
I think it's just pause.
Pause with Sam J.
Just pause.
Just pause.
Should I just say pause?
Pause.
But it's a show.
Yes.
But it's
Pause with Sam J.
just pause.
And that's what you kind of do in the episode. There's conversation, there's skits, there's interviews, there's music. Sometimes there's a whole conversation that centers around a particular topic. Mm-hmm. And Sam J is the center, kind of centering that conversation.
Yeah. And each week the conversations are generally like, well, actually, you not even say generally, but it's like race and queerness that happens. And
gender.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that black, I don't want to say race.
Yeah.
I want to say like black perspective and queer identity is talked about.
Yes.
Each week in this show too. So I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Awesome. Well, with that, let's get into favorite moment.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think my favorite moment was the transition of thinking about the relationship between white people and black people and then talking to a domestic abuse counselor. And that's not the first time I've seen this idea, but the way that it was laid out to give a definition of who an abuser is and whether an abuser is somebody who can be counseled out of what they're doing or whether they're a narcissist who really cannot be helped. And then just how the whole setup was for this whole like video essay in a way of bringing us to this final question, which maybe we'll get into later. But I like the way Sam J set that up. I thought it was brilliantly done to paint the picture for anybody who hasn't heard this before, or if you have heard it, just finding a real way to contextualize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, each episode she takes on a particular theme, like most shows do. Yeah. But in this way, the theme was abusive relationships.
Yeah.
And yeah, she brought in how the concept of abusive relationship applies to black folk in America and white folk in America.
Yeah.
And that's the relationship that we're in. So, yeah.
I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was interesting. I feel like my favorite, a couple of things that I wrote down as like favorite moments in this. There were really like the stopper moments. For example, okay, so there are the sketches and the scenes or whatever, but then we also have the moments where they're just in the room talking and in the party.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where we have these two white guys who are sitting on the couch, and then Sam J is kind of like just riffing off about this idea of abusive relationships, and then another guy, who I wish I knew his name, but another guy in the party looks at the white guys and is like, "This is your turn to talk." That was one of my favorite moments of this episode, and it was so quick. Like if you weren't like,
I love that.
You know what I mean? And it's stuff like that I love about this show overall, that we bring white folks into the conversation to just have an opportunity to talk.
Yes, but also be forced to talk, because that took me to going to a predominantly white college and sitting in a class, and as soon as things about black people come up, which is only going to be talking about like civil rights and slavery, that's the only time we come up. When I was in college, pre-Obama becoming president, and as soon as black people come up, the whole room swivels and turns to me and one or two other black people in the room to say, are y'all about to speak on this? And it's just like, I love it. Turn the table.
Yeah.
Y'all talk about it. Y'all explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Y'all figure it out. Y'all tell us. Defend them.
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
You know, I just love the moment. I love being able to say, well, you know, I guess I was kind of pissed off a little bit in the moment because that should have, to me, felt like in ways already like been the moment for them to talk and like without needing prompting.
Yeah.
So,
although should they just be piping up?
Well, to a degree, yes. I think that's kind of why there was that lull, because it was like, yeah, this is where you say something. This is a conversation. This isn't a verbal lashing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's one thing if it's like, this is a space to just get things off of our chest. It's another thing when I'm like literally painting a picture and not even in judgment, just in experience.
Yeah.
And I want you to also share your experience. So I don't know. Yeah.
I do think it was the time for them to talk. I think there's also something about making sure you're hearing what's being said before you jump in. Mm-hmm. But this is also an edited conversation, so
yo, that's real as hell, and I'm actually really glad you said that. But then I'm also like, I don't know how deep I want to get into that right now, because
it's not the central focus of the show. Yeah,
you know, oh my gosh, but
there's so much.
There's something to be said for giving people a space to just absorb and listen. But I also think
it was their time to talk.
Like what white people are there who like are sitting there unpacking their shit right now while the camera's on? Like,
yeah, that's not right who's been invited to this party. You
haven't thought about this already? Like, you haven't already done the unpacking? If you're doing the unpacking right now, fucking live, why are you at my party?
I mean,
but that's another conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
what were
why are you stuck when she's just talking? Anyway, love that moment when they got called out. Second moment I really loved was the ending of this episode.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, we were talking about how the whole episode was based around the concept of an abusive relationship between Black Americans and white Americans, or just like it was really not even between Black Americans and white Americans, but like America
and Black people,
Black Americans.
Yeah.
And at the very end of this episode, they kind of shape it where Sam J just asks, what should the abused person do? If Black folk in this metaphor, in this analogy, are the abused people, what should Black people do? And then the episode fucking ends. Like,
the end.
Like, the end. She asks this white woman abuse counselor, what should Black people do if you said, yes, Black people are the abused in this relationship in America? And it I guess the answers are, it's like, should we leave? Should we leave this relationship, or should we stay in this relationship? Should we try to work it out? Should we ... whatever it is? And the episode just ends. And I thought that was, I mean, just a brilliant way to end a show.
Yeah.
For the sake of, like, you know, more viewership and like more conversation, and like, you know, it was kind of baity, but then it was also like, that's how you do it.
That's how you do
you
it.
Create a conversation for people to reach their own conclusions, and I love that. I thought that was a really great part of this episode.
I think you said that so well, and I loved it too. I love that whoever is watching it, that is the question you're left with, and how many people are going to tackle that question with whomever is sitting next to them, or whoever else they know watches the show, or whoever they just are like, whoa, I never thought about it in this way. And I think that's the most important part that television can do, is spark an actual real conversation in real life.
Right.
Dope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, who was your woman crush?
I mean, there weren't like a lot of new women that we met in this episode, so I mean, it's Sam J. You know, it's a Sam J
Period.
show. I think mostly
Period.
Sam J is like my eternal woman crush throughout this entire season. And honestly, I know Sam J doesn't like Stuff for Stud Love, but I feel like Sam J, you my woman crush. Throughout this, it's me and you.
You're loved by another.
I love you,
masculine center woman.
I love you, Sam J. Honestly, yeah, I do, because I do love the audacity of it all. I love the curiosity.
Yeah.
And the fearlessness. You know what I'm saying? There's a really special place and a beautiful place to be a masculine woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want to say like, oh, I see you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, I see you. Because I'm not even going into all, because it's not necessary. I maybe can go into that in the queer canon, but
There we go.
I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Well, my woman crush is also Sam J in this episode. And I think it's because of just, one, how brilliantly I think like I said, this is like a video essay to me, and I think it was set up just really well. Really well done. If I were grading this, I'd be like, check, 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 check. You know? But then also, I just really appreciate that even when I disagree with her, she's willing to have conversations, and intentionally has conversations with people she doesn't agree with, or doesn't understand, or doesn't make the same choices as. And is like, all right, I'm going to go in, and maybe I know a lot about this, or maybe I know almost nothing about this, but I'm going to talk to them. And difference for me doesn't have to equal like I ostracize you, or I never relate to you, or I'm never in conversation with you. Actually, it makes me want to be in conversation with you, because I'm trying to figure it out. And I think anybody who has, like you said, that curiosity spirit is just like, that's genuine love to me. To say like, okay, I don't get it, but I have questions. That I love more than like, I don't get it and fuck that. You know, like that's not a spirit of love or unity or community. And I feel like this was like a tough conversation that she found a way to make really palatable. I did not feel as stressed as I typically do in conversations about this topic. And I think that's kudos. So,
yeah.
Thanks, Sam J.
Totally. You know what? It dawned on me right now, I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention how much I love Sam J for fucking inviting Big Pooh to this conversation. If you don't know much about me, I love rap. I'm a hip hop artist myself. And Big Pooh was a part of Little Brother, which is, in my mind, the like best rap duo to ever exist in humanity. Like, here we go. The only people that I feel like I would even sort of bring them into conversation with is Outcast. Okay. And that's a whole, like literally. Fonte, Big Pooh? What? Like, Sam J, I put the crown on your head for inviting rapper Big Pooh into this fucking conversation, because they are rap goats that nobody knows about. Well, not nobody, but like enough people don't. So let's keep this conversation going, and shout out you for bringing them into the conversation. I'm gonna leave that there.
Boom. Boom.
All right, so we're on what can stay, what can go.
All right. Am I taking this away first?
Boom.
Boom. Okay. What can stay? I love the interviews. I like that you're talking to professionals. I'm gonna mix my what can go in there. And I don't even know that this can go, but it's just something that I recognize. Is that when she interviews professionals, because she has an agenda, a motivation, a place that she's trying to take this, a point that she's trying to make, some of the questions can be way bigger than a professional can answer.
Right.
Or way bigger than like the group that she brings in can really answer, because you're really asking people to speak for a whole group of people that they don't even necessarily, they belong to, but they're at a different
in some
place,
ways, right? They belong
because
to,
they're in conversation with you, which means that they're in a different place with it. And so But I also really love using the conversation, using the interviews with the experts, using these like group interviews to move the conversation along to get us to a place where there's enough context for people to have their own conversation. So I love that. I like the setup of the show. I always want there to be more women speaking, and I do think Sam J leans more toward the masculine and the male centered, but I also think she is a black woman still, and she is speaking the most on this show. You know, she will cut her guest off to make sure that the point that she's trying to make gets inserted in so that she can do the show.
She's like,
in
pause.
a way, yes, pause.
With Sam J.
Yes, I'm speaking now, and I will wrap
turn.
this up so that we can make the transition that I've set up into these interviews. And I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, but it also means like there's a bit of crafting that is happening. There's a bit of disingenuousness that has to be played with in order to get us to the point of genuine context. So yeah, that's where I feel. Yeah.
Okay.
What about you?
All right. So in my what can stay category, in this particular episode, she spends a little bit of time with what she calls the quote, end quote, woods whites. Okay. Woods whites. Woods whites are whites in the woods.
Yes.
Right? Whites know them. Who go to the woods. As in the forest.
I've met them.
Not the backwoods whites. That's another group. Even though
I think they're in there too.
Actually, I'm
they're
sorry.
Part of it.
That was my own personal hood joke about backwoods.
Oh, I see.
See, it's too much gray area. Damn. It's too much gray area. Yeah, white people would say that the woods whites and the backwoods whites are the same. But when I say backwoods, I'm referring to the hood whites. People.
Not the Detroit whites who were born here, not the gentrifiers.
Not the woods whites. The
Shout
hood
out
whites.
To White Mike. Love
not
you.
The hood whites. I love how it rhymes too. We did not plan any of this.
No.
Hoods whites, woods whites.
Not just the hooded whites.
Ketchup mustard.
No, those are different from the hood whites and the
ketchup mustard. Follow us. All right. So she brings the woods whites into the conversation, and there are some moments that after we get over the hurdle that these white folk are afraid to speak about what's happening.
Yeah.
They actually get into some shit. Like, they actually start to say things, and I think that can stay.
Yes.
Continuing that conversation and like saying, hey, I'm actually not going to accept your silence. You gonna say something right now.
Period.
Say something. You know, and I think she did a really great job of like painting the picture for them. Like, look, she's like, I'm not a gangster. I'm not a Crip. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a blood. I don't belong to the hood lifestyle, quote unquote. But I'm close enough to say this is generally what's going on, and this is why it's going on. Yeah. And her getting them to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I love that she called them out and said, like, you not speaking is actually part of the problem.
Yeah. I love that she was able to get that out. So I think that can stay. And the dudes who got to talking said some really funny things in terms of like, he said this quote where, you know, he sees neo-Confederates, which are these crazy white people who are around right now storming the Capitol and doing all that stupid shit. But neo-Confederates are like redneck hoteps. And I thought that was funny that one, he even knew what a hotep was and was able, because I'm like, do white people know that? I have no idea. But to say like every black person that you meet is not a hotep.
Yeah.
You know, every black person that you meet isn't on, you know, I don't know, black supremacy, period, full stop. I don't want to hear nothing from no other colors.
Yeah. And I will change what facts are to
in order to fit
this.
An agenda. Yeah.
You don't need to do that to be empowered as a black person. We don't need
I love
facts.
how you said that. I love how you said that, because that's it. And like, it's a lot of time you have certain sects of people within groups of people who are their own identity, but sometimes get painted as the whole of the identity.
Yeah.
So to have white people say, like, I mean, I know what you're talking about, but like, I'm not that person, so I can't really speak on that person.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes every now and then black folk need to hear that. You know what I mean? Not to forget that the crazy ones exist.
Yeah.
But just to also position the crazy ones inside of the not crazy ones.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I'm not trying to like put capes out there and like save people.
No.
But I think it's better contextualization, and that happens through the conversations.
I love that. I love that you said that, because I think that is a big part of the thing, is that we can't be in conversation if two things happen. If like we are saying like, oh, well, we're not a part of that, then that excludes you from being in the conversation if you won't take any ownership. But then if we're also saying, well, you are completely that, so I don't even want to talk to you, it's like that also excludes people from the conversation. And I think when bad things happen, one of the white guys with the AC/DC hat was talking about how you have to do, as a white person, deep self-work to be at a place where you see a black person do something you don't like and you don't paint a racist picture on it. And I think everybody goes through that. When a white person does something you don't like, it's really easy to say, you're doing that because you are a racist.
Yeah.
And they might be doing a racist thing, and they may have some racist beliefs, but their intention might not be there. And when you only give that as like their sole identifier, you exclude yourself from being able to be in conversation and get to a new place. And if they take that on as their sole identifier, they exclude themselves from being able to be in conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes to that final question of like, is this an abusive relationship that can be rectified? Can there be conversation? Or do we just, call our girlfriend and be like, yo, they not about to be home between the hours of 3 and 6. Can you pick me up? I got my bags packed. I need a new ID in a hotel. That's not to be funny about abusive relationships, but to be real.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I have something here that's written in the what can stay category, and I don't know if it really should be there, if I meant it in the what can go category, but it's a quote around this dude who says, just prepare, talking about a race war. And I personally feel like the concept of the race war feels like propaganda to me, like in a way that I think I have felt the feelings of like, well, what are we gonna do, man? Like, either we gonna fight it out or we just gotta chill out, but I think honestly, it's so complicated for me to even like voice right now. No, you know what? I'm gonna bring that into the what can go. I'm gonna just go deep into the what can go. Race war propaganda can go.
Yeah, because that is the war.
And I think it can go because how can a black queer woman be on HBO, like have a show named after her, and then be like, like what is, I guess I'm curious as to like, I know that we still have fighting to do in terms of like what's happening in terms of race in America, but I feel like, is it more fighting or is it more unpacking? And I think when we frame it around fight, that feels, I mean, that's me versus you. That's that thing. But I think so much about race is really more personal fight.
Yeah. It's
more like you have unpacking to do on a personal level and not me coming at you like, get your shit together, cracker. Like, or hey, black people, we got to get ready to kill these crackers because they on some shit. You know what I mean? And it's like so much of what would make us want to go fight and kill and defend actually, to me, needs to be unpacked.
Yeah.
On a personal level,
because it won't
than
stop
what it does to kill somebody. Because then now you got the next generation mad you killed my daddy.
Yeah,
you did X, Y, and Z. You know, and it's I'm gonna leave it there. But no, yeah, I don't know, like that 100. Concept of saying like when she goes on like the there's a piece in it where she's like the crackers are coming and it's supposed to be like the British are coming, are coming, and it's the crackers are coming and. I'm gonna throw in this
performance art.
But. One, I will take that as like its own joke, but I also feel like it kind of speaks to this stance that black people in America have zero survival skills, and I think broadcasting that like black people in the hood have no survival skills. Now, I'm not going to ignore the obvious. If you've never been to, if any person who's never lived in the woods, never been to the woods, maybe does not have the best survival skills.
Yeah, I don't think many of us can.
But I also think it's a lot of black people. When you speak to black people,
yeah,
and then to say, in order for me to speak to black people, I have to go to the hood because that's where blacks are. I think it totally negates a group of black people and like a nice number of black people in America who aren't afraid of the outside.
Like a bunch of Southern black people.
You know what I'm saying? Or, I mean, even
and like Midwest when I
first started camping was with Northern ass, Detroiter ass black women who will go out to the West Michigans and the Northern Michigans and the fucking woods. You know what I mean? Who actually know how to build a fire, who actually know how to survive out in the fucking woods. So like when you say, come on man, I'm trying to make a point, dog. Damn, bro. Okay, like
no, there are women who could just survive. Yes.
Combine enough of these black women together and black men out here. It's like black people can fucking live in the woods. Yeah. You know, so I don't know. There's a piece that of that it's like I get what you're saying, but it didn't really hit me in a way that's like black people cannot survive. I've always felt like a woods ass bitch. You know what I'm saying? Like I was in Girl Scouts as a kid. Yeah. So like that shit never scared me. Yeah. But then when you do get into certain areas of black folk who haven't done that.
Yeah.
But then paint that as like the sum of the black experience, that can go for me.
You know, I think that's reaching into another conversation about like where the fear of the woods started for black people, and that the woods are the place that you get hunted. It's also the place where you escape, but on the way to escaping you can be hunted there by these white people who love the woods and are out to be slave catchers, be, you know, supremacists, out to do these things. And I totally feel your point though. I totally feel your point, and I thought it was funny, but I also was alarmed by the comment. And I think it made sense because I think these people who believe in this replacement theory and are afraid that like, oh, we have a black woman vice president and black women are taking over. And it's like, I would love for black women to take over. I'm trying to figure out what y'all definition of black women taking over is.
Right.
It doesn't fit mine. I'm ready for black women to completely take over.
Yes.
You know, and in ways I feel like we have taken over. We have. For my life, black women are the head. But for America, I'm like, come on, this is really extreme. You look like a big man afraid of a little spider. Okay, and not to put like black women are the spider, but like you're making this their fear is based in an idea rather than a reality. And I do think there is a lot to unpack. And I think it was an interesting moment for Sam J and for me to hear this white dude talk about, you know, they're afraid that black women specifically are going to replace them. And I think that's why I found that the crackers are coming so funny because I'm like, get up on that horse and go through the streets. And, you know, the facts that she was spitting and the advice she was giving was nonsensical, not going to help us in an actual race war. But I agree. I think there's a lot of propaganda, and there's a big population of people who buy into this replacement theory, and then there are a lot of fringe people who make it seem like this movement is even bigger than it actually is. But for the people who are actually willing to get up and fight for their whiteness, this is more of a political conversation than it is an actual head-to-head. Now, what is head-to-head is this fight with the supremacist police system. You know, that is true head-to-head with these, you know, militias, with these white supremacists who are willing to kill tens of people at a time. But I also agree, I don't want to buy into something that continues to further divide rather than bringing people into the middle, nuanced part of the conversation, which is where I think we will lose less lives and get more done.
Yeah. Ugh. I have another note in here too around like before we get into queer canon, I wrote a little like sub note around black canon.
Yes.
And where some of this fits in here, or these questions that came up for me, and thinking about black identity as like traumatic identity or like traumatized identity. And I'm curious if that's something that black people can move past, and if we want to move past it, and then also like who is the we? When we talk about, you know, we as black people, because there's so much diversity in that we, then can we move past the identity of trauma?
Yes. I feel like this takes us back to 20s by Lena Waithe and this conversation between Nia and is right there.
I'm so mad.
We watched too many shows. Ben, thank you.
Come on.
She always comes through with the names. Yes.
I do. I come through with the names.
She really be remembering the names. I'm just like, the character that represented this. But Ben and Nia on 20s on BET are having this conversation about like what really represents black people, and Ben saying like, I'm only on Black joy. We're not showing anything traumatic. We're not basing anything black in trauma. We are mundane. We are happy people. Good things happen to us. Nice lighthearted stories. Let's do some rom-coms. And Nia is like, I want to hear real stories where people get to grow. And I feel like that's kind of what you're bringing up here. Like, can we exist outside of the trauma? Can there be other things that really fit into the black identity? And I think the problem with black identity is they made this shit up and put their own parameters on it, and now we are reclaiming it. And I feel like similar to like where nigga, like you are trying to redefine it and reclaim it, and everybody has a different sense of what it means at this point. And everybody has a different entry point, and everybody has a different point of where they want to exit. And it's tough because, we are just arbitrarily putting markers on blackness that seem to fit the widest swath of who is black.
Come on.
And as we go through time and people develop their more defined sense of self, it's going to be really hard to define that. It's already really hard to define it. It's hard to define what black joy is, because joy is a personal feeling.
Come on.
It's not a static thing. It's not a fact. It's how you define it. What makes you happy. So black joy can be smoking blunts to one person, and that can be black ignorance. That could be black crime. That could be black entrepreneurship. That could be a lot of things.
Yes. And I think it just makes me think about, what is the conversation that when we meet black people in TV and media and whatever, we're really seeing where they are in their black journey.
Yes.
We're not seeing where black people are, but we're literally just seeing where they are. And we just have to continue to get to the place where it's just like, I'm not seeing black people, I'm seeing a black person.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And let that person's experience, existence, story speak and stand for itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want more of that conversation, to let a black person, especially if it's a black person, if it's not even like, we're the blacks, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we the blacks aren't coming to the table, like, don't ever think of it as we the blacks. Like, think of it as the black people who are speaking are speaking.
Yes. In saying this.
Their
and it represents people who are like them.
Yeah. That's it. Okay, so queer canon. Queer canon.
Queer canon.
Where does
we
this
made
fit?
it here.
Yeah, episode 2, season 2.
So part of me is like, this episode is not very queer, and this episode is totally queer. So for me, this episode was not about being queer. I don't even know if like being queer came up in this episode at all. But the fact that this conversation is headed by a black queer woman, to me, already makes it queer, you know, in the same way that it just makes it black. But then there's another piece to it, and I think that's like, especially when I think about where black men are positioned in this conversation, I think there is something very queer in a super positive way about not being interested in fucking black men or building, you know, families necessarily in union with black men, but still superbly caring about black men and what happens to them. And that is a different kind of love that is not based on like a necessity. It is just based on like a communal love of, I see you and I see a part of me that relates to you, and that makes me want to defend you, research you, celebrate you, uplift you, learn more about you, be in conversation with you. And I think that is the point where I think queer love is at its best.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That was beautiful. Yeah, her stance on just saying like, I'm a queer black woman, but I do have a space where I understand black masculinity, that masculine identity, and empathize and care. That was really dope. I think but what I got from this in terms of queer canon was very different.
Let's go.
One of the things that I pulled from this episode was black lesbians and white dudes. Like,
say more, please.
Like, I feel like it brings me to the Outcast trope, like, and black women and white dudes in some sort of way have like this, like, the outlier situation going on in terms of like, I think how people see us on either side of the spectrum. Like, I think in white people, and Sampe kind of talks about this, how like she doesn't feel that white women really support white men's well-being.
Okay, yeah.
Overall, she's like, I feel like white women will throw white men under the bus when it fits them, and then white women will not take responsibility for like.
I want to come back to that, but I want you to finish your point.
Okay, well, I just want to say, because honestly, this wasn't even what I wrote down. This is kind of like me going around the mulberry bush order to come back to this. But I mean, throughout the episode, Sam J talks about white women not being emotional support for white men, and that's why white men go crazy or whatever. And I think in some sort of way there is a lot, there are black women who feel not necessarily supported by black men, and so it's like it kind of, you have these outlier situations, and I feel like a lot of that ends up turning into this like survivalist mentality. Like, white men feel like they won't survive. They won't survive, so they have to go even harder. And I feel like black women on the opposite side of that spectrum feel like, we have to survive. If I don't work twice as hard and do the work that's necessary, if I don't learn how to live in the woods, if I don't learn how to grow a garden, if I don't learn how to build a fire, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like all of these things are like bare essentials. I feel like I see a lot of in Black lesbians. Like survivalist tools. Like when I think about, I thought about Harriet Tubman, you know, and I feel like Harriet Tubman would get along with a lot of white dudes in the woods. You want to talk about knowing how to live in the woods. You know what I'm saying? A black woman
today,
who's putting it all on the line for black people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But this
and she
person
did have great relationships
is a
with white men who
survivalist.
helped her.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's this like weird little thing that you see, I feel like, amongst Black lesbians and Black women, that there's, I don't know, there's this weird pocket where sometimes white dudes align in it, and we see that in that episode where she's like, you know, let me talk to y'all, or I feel empathetic to white dudes or whatever. And I'm just like, I've seen this outcast trope happen before.
That is so interesting to me, because I think that challenges me, because I feel so separate from white men. And I think in the way that the abuse counselor, who was a white woman, was talking about, like, white men seem to have all this power, so why do we need to empathize with them? And I now see how it's just like, oh, well, Black men may also have this same view of Black women, of like, y'all have so much power. Actually, your power is stopping me from having power.
Yeah.
And that, you know, Black men have a whole replacement theory about not being the head of household, not being the father figure, not being the one who makes the decisions, not upholding patriarchy as America has taught them it should be upheld. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Hey, no doubt. There's, you know, just yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there around how Black men feel ostracized, and it's just like, that's how Black women feel. that's how these white dudes who are going crazy and feel like they have to storm the fucking Capitol feel. They tripping, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel that way. Like, you don't feel pushed to the margins. And
I really appreciated how Sam J was talking about the things that the moment right now of people really calling out white men as mediocre, and how that has been used as a way to uplift everybody else, to say, like, they're not that great. Here are the people who are truly great, and how that's challenging white men's self-esteem, maybe for the first time, because they typically do get to be on top, and what that can mean for a person to have their identity sort of broken down and crushed in a way, and they have to now build their own identity for themselves. And if that is out of practice for somebody, that really can send them spiraling, in the same way it would send anybody spiraling. Right. You know, if you constantly are telling a kid who thought they were top dog that now they are not, you are intentionally killing their confidence. And that's going to have consequences. And it's not to say that any of us deserve the consequences, but it is. And we can see it, you know, we can see it. You know, I don't even want to go into all the tragedies that have even happened just this year at the hands of spiraling out of control white dudes. Or anybody who's been attached to this idea of America and then finding anybody to blame for the reason why they can't reach that American ideal is just devastating. Can't even really go there right now. But, I like that she pointed out that when you use downing somebody else to empower somebody else, you can actually fuel a fire that was maybe just a spark. You can turn that into a full-blown forest fire that's now burning a bunch of shit down that never had to happen. And that is not our fault, but I do think there is a communal responsibility to recognize what's going on.
And I appreciate that about this show. It makes me wonder who's really watching this show too. Like,
is it just black people?
Is it just black people who have already had these conversations? Do white people see this like, I'll roll the dice on Pause with Sam J, you know? And I hope that it's there. I think to some degree too, when you invite these white people onto the show, they will at least tell their family, hey, I was on this show. Hopefully, maybe they won't tell anybody and it's a complete secret. Yeah. But I hope that it does spark some conversations and diffuses some bombs. Yeah. Some ticking time bombs in America's like racial sphere. Yeah. So shout out this show. I really can't wait to see what happens next throughout this season with Pause with Sam J. I love the conversations. We love the conversations because, I mean, look at this. We're at 45 minutes
I know.
now.
We've really talked about it.
You know, it's really good stuff. So
even when I don't agree, I like the approach.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. So, you know, I wanted to bring up, for people watching the show and maybe comments in this, you know, comment section around, what do you think around black folk leaving America? And do you know how to survive? I want to know, where are my black lesbian survivalists at? You know, if you are a black lesbian survivalist, you can live out in the woods. You know how to identify the plants you can eat versus the poison plants, the bugs, the whole thing, what water is safe. I want to hear from you lesbians, okay?
I want to hear from the lesbians who know how to fight the non-woods whites, the systematic woods whites, the ones who like
those in black survivalists
at the bank. You know, how do y'all? Are y'all a black survivalist
too? That's a black survivalist too. If you got your
investments in order, if you know what black businesses to support, if you could even make it a whole day just off black people,
come on.
I want to know if you out there.
I love that. I love that. I need my black survivalists on both sides of the spectrum, okay?
Shout out to my corporate survivalists, entrepreneurs.
And my wood survivalists, okay? That's it. All right, y'all. It's been real. Thank you so much for tuning in to Woman Crush Every Day. And until next time, peace.